Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. It's past midnight, and you're in an old, creaky house in the middle of nowhere. The kind of place where the floorboards groan under your feet and the shadows seem to move on their own. Trying to sleep, but your dog, your loyal companion, suddenly bolts upright, ears perked, eyes fixed on the darkness. A low growl rumbles in its throat, then erupts into a wild, frantic bark that sends chills down your spine. You check the windows. The doors, nothing's there. No intruders, no strange noises, just the eerie feeling that your dog sees something you can't. You laugh it off. Tell yourself it's just a squirrel outside, but deep down you wonder, what if the dog knows something you don't? This, my friends, is the spark that ignites our thrilling tale. Dumb Witness, a mystery so tangled, so shadowy, that even the great Hercule Poirot calls it unsolvable till he steps in with his brilliant mind, that perfectly twirled mustache. Welcome to an epic YouTube journey where we'll unravel this Agatha Christie-inspired case over 10 gripping chapters. We'll follow clues, dig into secrets, and chase the truth alongside a dog who might just be the key to it all. So, grab a cozy blanket, maybe some popcorn, and let's dive into a story that'll keep you guessing until the very end. If you love a good whodunit, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single twist. A chilly fog-draped morning in 1930s London, and Hercule Poirot is in his immaculate apartment on Whitehaven Mansions. The place is a masterpiece of order, every teaspoon polished to a mirror shine, every book on the shelf aligned with military precision. The air smells faintly of lavender and the herbal tisane's fancy word for teeth that he sips from a delicate porcelain cup. His friend, Captain Arthur Hastings, is lounging in an armchair, his lanky frame sprawled out as he skims the morning paper, muttering about cricket scores and the sorry state of the weather. "Really, Poirot?" he says, tossing the paper aside. "You'd think London could manage one sunny day." Poirot, adjusting his perfectly knotted tie, merely raises an eyebrow. He's not one for small talk about the weather. His mind craves order, logic, and most of all, a challenge. And today, that challenge is about to arrive in a way he never expected. The doorbell chimes. Sharp and insistent, cutting through the quiet like a knife. Hastings jumps. Slightly always a bit dramatical, Poirot glides to the door with the grace of a man who knows exactly how to make an entrance. Even in his own home, the postman, a nervous young lad with a cap pulled low, hands over a single letter and practically sprints away, as if the envelope itself is cursed. Poirot examines it with the care of a jeweler inspecting a rare gem. The paper is thick, expensive, the kind used by people with old money and older secrets. The address is written in a hurried, trembling hand. And the postmark is from Market Basing, a sleepy village in the English countryside. But what catches Poirot's eye is the date, too. Months old? Why, he wonders, has this letter taken so long to reach him? His little gray cells, as he calls his brilliant brain, are already tingling with curiosity. Back in his armchair, Poirot slices open the envelope with a silver letter opener, his movements precise, almost theatrical. The letter is from Miss Emily Arundell. It's a wealthy spinster who lives in a grand old house called Little Green House. Her words spill across the page in a jumble of fear and desperation. She writes of a series of accidents that have left her shaken to her core. First, there was a fall down the grand staircase of her home, a misstep. She thought at first, until she noticed a strange slickness on the steps, like someone had polished them to a dangerous sheen. Then came a sudden illness after a quiet dinner, her stomach twisting in agony as if she'd swallowed something foul. And just last week, a heavy gilt-framed painting crashed to the floor in her bedroom, missing her head by inches as she slept. "These are not coincidences, Monsieur Poirot," she writes. "I fear someone in my household wishes me harm. I am surrounded by family, by servants, but I trust no one. And yet I have no proof, only a feeling and the strange behavior of my dear Bob." Bob, it turns out, is her fox terrier, a sprightly little dog with a shiny black nose and a habit of chasing his own tail. But lately, Bob has been different. He barks at empty corners, his hackles raised, as if ghosts lurk in the shadows. He stares at the staircase, the same one where Emily fell, with an intensity that unnerves her. Once he dropped his favorite rubber ball at her feet, looked her in the eyes, and whined, as if trying to speak. "Bob knows something," she writes. "He is my only true friend, but he cannot speak. You, Monsieur Poirot, are my last hope." The letter ends with a plea for him to come to Market Basing, to uncover the truth before it's too late. Poirot leans back, his green eyes glinting like polished jade. Hastings, peering over his shoulder, scoffs. Sounds like an old lady with too much time on her hands. Probably tripped over her own slippers and blamed the butler. But Poirot shakes his head, his mustache twitching with the hint of a smile. "Non, mon ami," he says, his Belgian accent thick with certainty. "This is no mere fancy. It's a handwriting. It trembles with fear. The delay of the letter, it suggests interference. And this dog, this Bob, he does not lie. Animals, they see what we do not, must go to Market Basing." Hastings groans, already dreading the countryside's lack of decent pubs. But he knows better than to argue with Poirot when his gray cells are in motion. Let's take a moment to unpack this. Hercule Poirot isn't your run-of-the-mill detective. He doesn't chase suspects through foggy alleys or rely on fingerprints and magnifying glasses. His weapon is his mind sharp, relentless, and obsessed with order. This letter is like a single thread in a tangled tapestry, and Poirot is already tugging at it, eager to see what unravels. The delayed letter bothers him. Was it misplaced? By accident, or did someone deliberately keep it from reaching him? The accidents, too, feel too convenient, too perfectly timed to be mere chance. And then there's Bob, a dog as a witness. It's absurd, and yet Poirot knows that animals don't invent stories. If Bob is agitated, there's a reason, and Poirot intends to find it. So what's the plan? Poirot announces their heading to Market Basing. He instructs Hastings to pack a suitcase light on golf clubs, heavy on common sense, and they catch the next train out of London. The journey is uneventful, but Poirot's mind is anything but still. He's thinking about Emily Arundell, a woman alone in a house full of people who might want her fortune. He's thinking about the staircase, the painting, the mysterious illness. And he's thinking about Bob, the dog who might hold the key to it all. As the train chugs through the misty countryside, Market Basing comes into view, a picture perfect. Village with cobblestone streets, thatched cottages, and a village green where locals trade gossip over cups of tea. Little green house looms at the edge of town, a Victorian mansion with ivy-covered walls and tall, narrow windows that seem to watch their approach. Poirot steps off the train, his patent leather shoes gleaming despite the dusty platform. He adjusts. His hat brushes a speck of lint from his coat and murmurs, "The truth, it hides in the shadows. But I, Hercule Poirot, will bring it to the light." Hastings, lugging their bags, mutters something about needing a pint, but he follows anyway. They make their way to Little Green House, where Emily Arundell waits along with her relatives, her servants, and a dog who might know more than anyone. The air feels heavy with secrets, and Poirot's senses are on high alert. Who wrote the letter, and why was it delayed? Was Emily's fall an accident, or was the staircase sabotaged? And what exactly did Bob see that night on the stairs? This is just the beginning, folks, and already the mystery is thick as London fog. Poirot's on the case, and if you know anything about him, you know he doesn't stop until every puzzle piece fits. This story is a masterclass in paying attention to the little things, the shaky handwriting, the delayed letter, the dog's uneasy stare. Ever had a moment where you felt something was off? Maybe because of a pet's weird behavior or a gut instinct? Drop it in the comments. I'd want to hear your stories. The next chapter, we'll step inside Little Greenhouse and meet the cast of characters who live there. The charming nephew, the scheming niece, the quiet servants, and of course, Bob the terrier, who's hiding something and who's telling the truth. Stick around to find out, and if you're loving this mystery, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next clue. The train's whistle fades into the distance as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings step onto the platform in Market Basing. The air crisp with the scent of damp earth and blooming roses. The village is a postcard come-to-life cobblestone. Paths wind past thatched cottages, their windows glowing with the warm light of late afternoon. Children chase each other across the village green, and an old man tips his hat as he pedals by on a rickety bicycle. But Poirot's eyes are fixed on the horizon, where a little green house looms like a silent sentinel. Its ivy-covered walls and tall, narrow windows give it an air of grandeur, but also secrecy, as if the house itself is holding its breath, waiting for someone to uncover its truths. Poirot adjusts his immaculate coat, his mustache twitching with anticipation. "Mon ami," he says to Hastings, who's struggling with their luggage, "this house, it has stories to tell, and we shall listen." Hastings wiping sweat from his brow mutters, "I'd rather listen to a pint at the local pub." But he follows, as always, drawn into Poirot's orbit like a moth to a flame. The walk to Little Greenhouse is short but feels longer. The crunch of gravel underfoot, the only sound breaking the stillness. As they approach, the mansion's details come into focus. A heavy oak door, polished brass knocker, and a faint creak from a weather vane spinning lazily atop the roof. Before they can knock, the door swings open, revealing a wiry, middle-aged woman with a pinched face and sharp eyes, Miss Lawson, Emily Arundell's companion. "You must be Monsieur Poirot," she says, her voice a mix of relief and suspicion. "Miss Arundell's expecting you, though I must say she's not been herself." Gaze darts to Hastings, then back to Poirot as if sizing them up. Offers a polite bow, his charm disarming her just enough to ease the tension. "Madame, I am here to bring clarity to Miss Arundell's troubles." This, he gestures to Hastings, who's trying to look dignified despite a suitcase handle. Digging into his palm is my associate, Captain Hastings. Inside, Little Greenhouse is a study in contrasts, opulent yet faded, grand yet stifling. The foyer is lined with dark wood paneling, and a massive chandelier dangles overhead, its crystals catching the dim light. A grand staircase sweeps upward, its polished banister gleaming, but Poirot's eyes linger on the steps. This, he knows, is where Emily fell, her body tumbling down in what she called an accident. He notices a faint scuff mark on the wood, barely visible, and files it away in his mental catalogue. Miss Lawson leads them to the drawing room, where Emily Arundell waits, seated in a high-backed chair like a queen on a throne. She's in her late 60s, frail but regal, with silver hair pinned tightly and eyes that miss nothing. Beside her, curled up on a velvet cushion, is Bob the fox terrier. His ears perk up at their entrance, and his bright eyes lock onto Poirot as if sizing him up. Poirot, who's never been much for animals, offers a small nod. "Bonjour, Monsieur Bob," he says softly, and Hastings stifles a laugh. Emily's voice is steady but laced with worry as she greets them. "Monsieur Poirot, I feared you wouldn't come. That letter, I wrote it in such a state, I scarcely remember what I said." She recounts the accidents, the fall, the illness, the painting. Each incident, she insists, felt deliberate, though she can't prove it. "My family, my servants there, all so kind to my face, but I feel their eyes on me, watching, waiting." She strokes Bob's head, and the dog leans into her touch, his gaze never leaving the doorway. "And Bob, he's been my guardian." He barks at night, stares at the staircase. "I swear he knows something." Poirot listens intently, his head tilted, his fingers steepled under his chin. Hastings, meanwhile, shifts uncomfortably, clearly, itching to dismiss the whole thing as an old lady's nerves. Let's meet the household, 'cause this is where the mystery thickens. First, there's Charles Arundell, Emily's charming nephew, in his early 30s, with a roguish grin and a reputation for gambling. He's all smiles, offering Poirot a handshake that's just a bit too firm, as if proving something. Next is Teresa Arundell, his sister, a glamorous young woman with bobbed hair and a penchant for expensive dresses. She lounges on a sofa, flipping through a fashion magazine, but her eyes flicker toward Emily's every move. Then there's Dr. Tanios, a Greek physician married to Emily's niece Bella. He's polite but reserved, his accent thick, his hands fidgeting with a pocket watch. Bella herself is mousy, nervous, always glancing at her husband for approval. The servants round out the cast. Wilhelmina, the cook, a stout woman with a sharp tongue. Annie, the young maid who seems terrified of her own shadow. And Miss Lawson, who hovers around Emily like a protective hen. Each one, Poirot notes, has access to Emily's life and her fortune. Poirot's mind is already at work, cataloging every detail. Charles's easy charm feels practiced, like a man used to talking his way out of trouble. Teresa's indifference seems forced, her manicured nails tapping impatiently. Dr. Tanios's fidgeting betrays a nervous energy, and Bella's timidity could hide a deeper motive. The servants, too, are not above suspicion. Wilhelmina's gruff demeanor could mask resentment, and Annie's fear might mean she's seen something she shouldn't. And then there's Bob, who trots over to Poirot and drops a worn rubber ball at his feet. The detective stares at it, intrigued. "This ball," he murmurs. "It was mentioned in the letter. A clue, perhaps." Hastings rolls his eyes. "It's just a dog toy, Poirot. You're reading too much into it." But Poirot's smile is, "Knowing mon ami, there is no such thing as too much when it comes to the truth. Let's talk about why this matters." Poirot's strength is his ability to see what others miss, that lingers too long, the detail that doesn't fit. Little Greenhouse is a pressure cooker of motives. Money, jealousy, secrets. Emily's wealth is no secret, and her will, rumored to be substantial, hangs over the household like a storm cloud. Poirot knows that greed can turn even the kindest face into a mask. For us, it's a lesson in observation. Ever been in a room full of people and felt the tension, like everyone's hiding something? That's what Poirot's walking into, and he's ready to peel back the layers. Bob, too, is a wild card. Dogs don't lie, and if Bob's barking at shadows, there's something to find as the evening settles in. Poirot and Hastings are shown to guest rooms upstairs. The house creaks around them, and Bob's sudden bark echoes from below, sharp and urgent. Poirot pauses at the top of the staircase, his hand brushing the banister. Notices a faint, oily residue, barely detectable, and his eyes narrow. "Interesting," he whispers. Hastings, already halfway to his room, calls out, "Come on, Poirot. It's just a drafty old house." But Poirot's not convinced. He's thinking about the letter, the accidents, and that dog whose barks seem to carry a warning. Tomorrow, he'll start questioning the household, watching their faces, listening for the slip that betrays a liar. This is Poirot at his finest, stepping into a web of suspicion and spinning it into clarity. The stage is set, and the players are in place. Who's telling the truth, and who's hiding a deadly secret? Have you ever met someone who seemed too charming, too perfect, and it made you suspicious? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm dying to hear them. In the next chapter, we'll follow Poirot as he begins his investigation, probing the family's secrets and chasing the clue that Bob's trying to share. Will he find the truth, or is this case as unsolvable as it seems? Stay tuned, and if you're hooked on this mystery, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next twist. The morning sun filters through the heavy drapes of Little Green House, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Hercule Poirot is up early, as is his habit, his appearance impeccable despite the restless night. The old mansion had creaked and groaned, and Bob's occasional barks had echoed through the halls, keeping sleep at bay. Poirot stands at his bedroom window, gazing out at the manicured gardens below, where dew clings to the roses like tiny diamonds. His mind, however, is far from the scenery. Those little gray cells of his are buzzing, piecing together the fragments of Emily Arundell's letter, the oily residue on the staircase, and the curious behavior of Bob, the fox terrier. Captain Hastings, still groggy from a night spent, grumbling about the lumpy guest bed, joins him in the dining room for breakfast. "I say, Poirot," he says, slathering jam on a piece of toast, "this place gives me the creeps. All those creaks and that dog barking half the night. Can't we just tell the old girl she's imagining things and catch the next train back to London?" Poirot's mustache twitches, a sure sign he's unimpressed. "Mon ami," he replies, sipping his tisane, "the truth does not reveal itself. To those who rush, we are here to observe, to listen, and to uncover what hides in plain sight." Breakfast is a tense affair. served by the nervous maid Annie, whose hands tremble as she pours tea. The household gathers around the long oak table, and Poirot takes the opportunity to study each face. Emily Arundell presides at the head, her frail frame wrapped in a shawl, her eyes sharp despite her age. She's quieter today, as if the weight of her fears has settled deeper. Charles Arundell, the charming nephew, is all smiles, cracking jokes about the weather and helping himself to a second helping of eggs. His sister Teresa picks at her food, her red lipstick starked against her pale face, her gaze flitting between Emily and the window. Dr. Tanios, the Greek physician, sits stiffly, his fingers drumming on the table, while his wife Bella keeps her head down, murmuring apologies when she spills a drop of tea. Miss Lawson, the companion, hovers near Emily, fussing over her plate and shooting wary glances at Poirot. And then there's Bob, curled up near Emily's chair, his ears twitching at every sound, his eyes fixed on the doorway to the hall. Poirot begins his investigation subtly, as is his way. He doesn't barge in with accusations or demand alibis. Instead, he engages the household in light conversation, his Belgian accent softening his questions into something almost charming. "Madame Arundell," he says, turning to Emily, "your home, it is magnificent. Such a grand staircase. But tell me, was it always so? Slippery." Emily's eyes widen slightly and she hesitates. "It was polished the day I fell. She says carefully. Wilhelmina, our cook, insists on keeping things spotless." Poirot nods, his expression unreadable, but he notes the way Wilhelmina, serving sausages at the other end of the table, stiffens at the mention of her name. He turns to Charles next, complimenting his stylish tie. "You must travel often, monsieur, Charles, to have such taste. Were you here when your aunt had her unfortunate fall?" Charles laughs, a little too loudly. "Oh, I'm in and out, you know. Always chasing a deal or a good horse race. I think I was in London that week, wasn't I, Teresa?" His sister nods, but her smile is tight, and Poirot's gray cells register the flicker of unease in her eyes. The conversation shifts to the illness that struck Emily after dinner one evening. "A most unpleasant experience," Emily says, her voice low. "I thought it was just something I ate, but it lingered for days." Dr. Tanios clears his throat, eager to assert his expertise. "Likely a stomach bug, madame. These things are common in the countryside." But Poirot notices Bella's hands clench in her lap, and he wonders if the good doctor's confidence is a little too rehearsed. He asks about the painting that nearly crushed Emily, and Miss Lawson jumps in, her voice shrill. "It was dreadful. It's that old frame. It must have been loose for years. I told Annie to check the fittings, but you know how young girls are so forgetful." Annie, clearing plates, nearly drops a saucer, her face flushing red. Poirot's smile is polite, but his mind is cataloging every reaction, every nervous tick. Then there's Bob. The little terrier has been quiet during breakfast, but as the meal ends, he trots to the foot of the staircase and sits, staring upward with an intensity that sends a shiver through the room. Poirot follows, kneeling to examine the spot where Bob sits. There, on the bottom step, is a faint scratch mark, barely noticeable unless you're looking for it. "Curious," Poirot murmurs, running his finger along the wood. Hastings, hovering behind, sighs. "It's just a dog, Poirot, probably chasing a mouse." But Poirot shakes his head. This dog, he does not chase mice. He watches. He knows. He picks up Bob's rubber ball, left near the step, and turns it over in his hands. It's worn, chewed, but there's something odd, a faint stain, almost like oil. Poirot tucks it into his pocket, ignoring Hastings' eye roll. Let's pause and think about what's happening here. Poirot is like a conductor, orchestrating this breakfast scene to reveal the household's dynamics. He's not just asking questions. He's watching how people answer Charles's forced laughter, Teresa's guarded glances, Bella's nervous fidgeting. Everyone has a motive, or so it seems. Emily's fortune is the elephant in the room, and with no children of her own, her will is a ticking time bomb. Charles and Teresa, her closest relatives, stand to gain the most. But their flashy lifestyles suggest they're already spending money they don't have. Dr. Tanios and Bella, struggling to maintain their modest practice, might see Emily's wealth as a lifeline. Miss Lawson, dependent on Emily's generosity, could fear losing her place if the old lady dies. Even the servants Wilhelmina, with her sharp tongue, Annie with her frightened eyes, might have secrets. And Bob? He's the wild card, a witness, who can't speak, but whose actions scream for attention. Poirot decides to dig deeper. He asks Emily for a tour of the house, using the excuse of admiring its architecture. She agrees, leaning on Miss Lawson's arm as they move from room to room. Poirot notes the layout, the staircase, wide and central, impossible to avoid. The dining room, where Emily fell ill, the bedroom where the painting fell. In each space, he looks for clues: a loose floorboard, a tampered frame, anything out of place. In the dining room, he lingers near the sideboard, where a decanter of sherry catches his eye. Fine vintage, he remarks, but his nose detects a faint, bitter undertone. Poison. He makes a mental note to investigate further. In Emily's bedroom, he examines the wall where the painting hung. The hook is sturdy, the wall uncracked, hardly the work of neglect. Someone, he suspects, loosened it deliberately. As the tour ends, Bob follows closely, his tail wagging but his eyes alert. At one point, he darts to a corner of the hall and sniffs insistently, pawing at the baseboard. Poirot kneels, his knees protesting, and finds a tiny sliver of glass, almost invisible against the dark wood. Most interesting, he says, slipping it into a handkerchief. Hastings, trailing behind, groans. You're seeing clues in every speck of dust, Poirot. Next, you'll say the wallpaper's suspicious. But Poirot's mind is racing. The glass, the oil on the ball, the scratch on the stair, they're pieces of a puzzle. He's determined to make them fit. This chapter is all about suspicion. It's about the slow unraveling of a household where everyone's hiding something. Poirot's genius lies in his patience. He doesn't accuse, he observes. For us, it's a reminder to trust our instincts, but back them up with evidence. Ever been in a situation where everyone seemed a little too nice, a little too eager to please? That's the vibe in Little Green House, and Poirot's just getting started. What's Bob trying to tell him with those stares and barks? And who's behind those accidents? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever caught someone in a lie just by watching their face? The next chapter, we'll see Poirot turn up the heat, questioning each suspect and chasing the clue that might crack the case wide open. Don't miss it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay in the loop. The afternoon light bathes Little Green House in a golden glow, softening the sharp edges of its Victorian grandeur, but the tension inside is as taut as a violin string. Hercule Poirot sits in the drawing room, his posture perfect, his hands folded neatly in his lap, a cup of untouched tea cooling on the table beside him. The room is elegant but oppressive, with heavy velvet curtains, a ticking grandfather clock, and portraits of stern Arundell ancestors glaring down from the walls. Captain Hastings paces near the fireplace, restless as ever, muttering about the lack of action. Really, Poirot, he says, tossing a log onto the fire. All this sitting and staring isn't getting us anywhere. Can't you just ask them who did it and be done with it? Poirot's mustache twitches, a flicker of amusement in his green eyes. Mon ami, he replies, his voice smooth as silk. The truth is not a bird that flies into your hands. It must be coaxed, observed, and trapped. And I, Hercule Poirot, am a master trapper. Hastings snorts but sits down, knowing better than to argue when Poirot's in his element. Today, Poirot begins his interrogations not with accusations or harsh lights, but with the finesse of a chess master moving his pieces. He's decided to speak to each member of the household privately, one by one, in the small study off the main hall. The room is cozy, with a single window overlooking the garden and a desk cluttered with Emily's papers. Bob, the fox terrier, follows Poirot everywhere, his little paws clicking on the hardwood floor. Now he curls up in a patch of sunlight, but his eyes stay alert, watching the door. Poirot notices this and files it away. Bob, he senses, is more than a pet. It's a sentinel, guarding secrets the humans won't share. First up is Charles Arundell, the charming nephew with the gamblers. Grin. He saunters in all confidence, his tailored suit slightly rumpled, as if he's been up late at the card table. "Monsieur Poirot," he says, flashing a smile. "I hope you're not here to accuse me of anything. I'm just a fellow trying to make his way in the world." Poirot smiles back, but it's a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "Of course, Monsieur Charles. I merely wish to understand the dynamics of this household." "You were in London, you say, when your aunt fell?" Charles nods, leaning back in his chair, but his fingers tap the armrest to tell. Poirot notes. "Yes, off on business. You know how it is deals to make, people to see." Poirot tilts his head. "And yet your aunt's letter suggests she expected you here? Curious, non?" Charles's smile falters, just for a moment before he laughs it off. "Aunt Emily's memory isn't what it used to be. She gets dates mixed up." Poirot nods, but his gray cells are worry. Charles's alibi is shaky, and his charm feels like a mask. Next is Teresa Arundell, who glides into the room like a film star, her silk dress rustling, her eyes cool and calculating. She lights a cigarette, blowing smoke in a way that feels practiced, defiant. "Monsieur Poirot," she says, "this is all rather dramatic, don't you think? Aunt Emily's old. Old people fall, get sick. It's not a conspiracy." Poirot's expression is mild, but his questions are sharp. "Mademoiselle, your aunt's accidents, they are precise, are they not? A staircase, a painting, a sudden illness. One might think someone wishes to hasten her departure." Teresa's laugh is brittle. "If you're suggesting I'd hurt my own aunt, you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm fond of her, and besides, I'm not here often enough to meddle." But Poirot notices her hand tremble as she flicks ash into a tray. She's hiding something, perhaps a debt, a scandal, or a motive tied to Emily's will. Dr. Tanios's. Third, his demeanor polite but guarded, his Greek accent thick as he adjusts his glasses. "I am a doctor, Monsieur Poirot," he says, almost defensively. "If there were poison, I would know. My wife's aunt is simply frail." Poirot leans forward, his voice soft but probing. "And yet, doctor, you were here the night of her illness. Did you examine her? Or perhaps prepare her meal?" Tanios flushes, his hands clenching. "I did no such thing. I'm a professional, not a criminal." His outburst is telling, and Poirot makes a mental note to check the doctors. Background. Bella, his wife, is next, and she's a bundle of nerves, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting her husband to burst in. "I don't know anything," she whispers, twisting a handkerchief. "Aunt Emily's been kind to us, but we don't need her money. We're fine." "Ah!" Her voice cracks, and Poirot senses feared not just of him, but of someone else. The servants are last. Wilhelmina, the cook, is gruff, her apron stained with flour as she glares at Poirot. "I keep this house running," she snaps. "I don't have time to push old ladies downstairs." But when Poirot asks about the night Emily fell ill, Wilhelmina's eyes flicker to the side, classic sign of evasion. Annie, the maid, is even worse, practically shaking as she answers. "I didn't see anything, sir," she mumbles, her hands wringing. "I just clean and do what I'm told." Poirot notices her glance toward the staircase, and he wonders what she's afraid of or who. Throughout it all, Bob watches from his corner, his tail still, but his eyes following every movement. When Annie leaves, he lets out a low growl, and Poirot's curiosity deepens. "What do you know, Monsieur Bob?" he murmurs, patting the dog's head. "Let's break this down." Poirot's interrogations are like a dance he leads. They follow, but every misstep reveals something. Charles's charm hides a weak alibi. Teresa's confidence masks desperation. Tanios's defensiveness suggests guilt, and Bella's fear hints at coercion. The servants, too, are uneasy Wilhelminas, too quick to deflect, and Annie's terror is palpable. Poirot's not just listening to their words. He's reading their bodies, their glances, their hesitations. It's a masterclass in psychology, and for us, it's a reminder to watch people closely. Ever notice someone fidget when you ask a simple question? That's the kind of clue Poirot lives for. And Bob's growls, his stares are like a compass, pointing to the truth as the day draws to a close. Poirot retreats to the garden, where the air is cool and the roses are in full bloom. He paces the gravel path, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind sorting through the day's findings. The oily residue on the staircase, the glass sliver in the hall, the bitter smell in the sherry decanter, they're all pieces, but the puzzle is far from complete. Bob follows him, carrying his rubber ball, and drops it at Poirot's feet. The detective picks it up, noting the oily stain again. "You, my friend," he says to the dog, "are trying to tell me something, and I will listen." Hastings, joining him, sighs, "You're talking to a dog now, Poirot. This case is driving you mad." But Poirot's smile is serene. Madness, mon ami, is assuming there is no method to the chaos. The day ends with Poirot more determined than ever. He's stirred the pot, and the household is on edge. Someone he knows is lying, maybe everyone. The question is, who's desperate enough to kill? And what does Bob's behavior mean? For us, it's a lesson in patience. Truth doesn't come quickly, but it comes to those who watch and wait. Ever had a moment where you knew someone wasn't telling the whole story? Share it in the comments, I'd love to hear. In the next chapter, Poirot digs deeper, exploring the house for physical clues and testing the suspect's stories. Will he find the smoking gun, or is the killer one step ahead? Don't miss it. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to keep up with this twisty mystery. The sun dips low over Market Basing, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, but inside Little Greenhouse, the atmosphere is anything but warm. Hercule Poirot stands in the grand foyer, his sharp eyes scanning the infamous staircase where Emily Arundell took her near-fatal tumble. The polished wood gleams under the chandelier's soft glow. But Poirot's focus is on the details of the faint, oily residue he noticed yesterday. The subtle scratch mark on the bottom step. He kneels, his knees protesting against the hard floor, and runs a gloved finger along the banister. "Curious," he murmurs, his Belgian accent thick with intrigue. Captain Hastings, leaning against the wall with his hands in his pockets, sighs loudly. "Poirot, you've been staring at that staircase for 10 minutes. It's just a staircase. Can't we at least have a cuppa before you start crawling around like a bloodhound?" Poirot's mustache twitches, a sign of mild exasperation. "Mon ami," he says, rising with the grace of a dancer. "The bloodhound follows the scent. Yes, but I, Hercule Poirot, follow the truth. And the truth, it hides in the smallest of places." Today, Poirot shifts his focus from people to places. He's questioned the household, noted their nervous tics and evasive answers. But now he seeks physical evidence, the kind that doesn't lie or fidget. With Bob the Fox Terrier trotting at his heels, Poirot begins a meticulous exploration of Little Greenhouse. The dog seems to sense his purpose. His ears perked, his tail wagging intermittently, as if encouraging the detective. Poirot starts in the dining room where Emily fell ill after dinner. The room is stately, with a long mahogany table and a sideboard laden with crystal glassware. He pauses at the sherry decanter, the one with the faint bitter smell. Carefully, he removes the stopper and sniffs again, his nose wrinkling. "Merely sherry," he mutters, slipping a small vial from his pocket to collect a sample. Hastings, watching from the doorway, groans. "Now you're stealing their booze? This case is turning you into a thief, Poirot." But Poirot ignores him, his mind racing. Poison, perhaps? It would explain Emily's sudden illness, but he needs proof. Next, he moves to Emily's bedroom, where the heavy painting nearly crushed her. The room is a time capsule of Victorian elegance, lace curtains, a four-poster bed, and a vanity cluttered with silver brushes and perfume bottles. The wall where the painting hung is bare now, the frame propped in a corner. Poirot examines. The hook that held it, a sturdy metal piece embedded in the plaster. This, he says, pointing, was not loose by accident. The screws they are intact, but the wood around them is splintered, as if forced. Hastings peers over his shoulder. Skeptical? Could have been old wood, Poirot. Houses like this fall apart all the time. Poirot shakes his head. Non mon ami. Old wood crumbles. This was tampered with. Finds another clue nearby. A tiny metal shaving, barely visible, caught in the carpet. Pockets it, his gray cells buzzing with possibilities. Bob, meanwhile, is restless. The little terrier darts to the corner of the room, near the fireplace, and begins pawing at the hearthstone. Poirot kneels beside him, intrigued. "What is it, Monsieur Bob?" "Yes," as if the dog might answer. He taps the stone, noticing it's slightly loose, and with some effort, pries it up. Beneath is a small hollow, containing a folded piece of paper. Poirot unfolds it carefully, a receipt for a hardware shop in Market Basing, dated a week before Emily's fall. Lists a can of floor polish and a small tool, possibly a screwdriver. "Most interesting," Poirot says, slipping the receipt into his pocket. Hastings, for once, looks impressed. "All right, that's odd, but a receipt could be anyone's." Poirot's eyes glint. "Precisely, mon ami. And that is why we must find who purchased it." The investigation continues in the garden, where Poirot hopes the fresh air might clear his thoughts. The grounds are lush, with neatly trimmed hedges and a graveled path winding past a rose arbor. Bob bounds ahead, sniffing the ground, then stops abruptly near a tool shed. He barks, sharp and insistent, his nose pressed to the door. Poirot opens it, revealing a cluttered space filled with rakes, shovels, and a tin of floor polish identical to the one on the receipt. "Voila," Poirot says, lifting the tin. It's half empty, and the lid is smeared with the same oily residue he found on the staircase. Hastings, trailing behind, scratches his head. "So someone polished the stairs to make them slippery? That's devilishly clever." Poirot nods. "And dangerous." The question is, who had access to this shed? Let's take a step back and think about what's unfolding. Poirot's method is like a microscope, zooming in on details others overlook: the oil, the metal shaving, the receipt. Each clue is a thread, and he's weaving them into a tapestry of truth. The sherry decanter suggests poison, the tampered hook points to sabotage, and the floor polish ties directly to Emily's fall. But it's Bob who's stealing the show. His barks, his stares, his uncanny ability to point Poirot to clues. The dog is practically a detective himself. For us, it's a lesson in trusting instincts, even those of a four-legged friend. Ever had a pet act like they knew something you didn't? Maybe a cat staring at a wall or a dog growling at a stranger? That's the kind of intuition Poirot's tapping into. Back inside, Poirot gathers the household for tea, using the casual setting to observe them again. Charles is joking about a horse race, but his eyes dart to the sideboard where the sherry sits. Teresa, sipping tea, seems distracted, her fingers twisting a pearl necklace. Dr. Tanios talks medical jargon, but his voice is too loud, as if covering nerves. Bella avoids eye contact, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Miss Lawson fusses over Emily, but her chatter feels forced, and Annie, serving biscuits, nearly drops the tray when Poirot mentions the tool shed. Wilhelmina, bringing in a fresh pot, glares at Annie, as if warning her to stay quiet. Bob, lying near Emily, lets out a low growl when Charles reaches for a biscuit, and Poirot notes it. The dog, he thinks, sees what we do not. As Tien's Poirot feels the puzzle taking shape.
Ow.
The clues are mounting. Oil, glass, a receipt, a tampered hook, but the motive remains elusive. Emily's wealth is the obvious answer, but who's desperate enough to kill for it? Charles and Teresa, with their extravagant habits? Dr. Tanios and Bella, struggling financially? Miss Lawson, clinging to her position? Or the servants, perhaps resentful or bribed? Poirot knows the answer lies in connecting the clues to the people, and Bob's behavior is the key. He resolves to watch the dog closely, to follow his lead. As he and Hastings retire to their rooms, Bob follows, dropping his rubber ball at Poirot's feet again. The detective picks it up, noting the oily stain once more. "You, my friend," he says to Bob, "are a witness most extraordinary." This chapter is all about evidence, the tangible kind that can't lie. Poirot's building his case, brick by brick, and every clue brings him closer to the truth. For us, it's a reminder to look beyond words, to seek proof in the details. Ever found something a note? A receipt that changed how you saw a situation? Drop your stories in the comments, I'm curious. In the next chapter, Poirot will confront the household with his findings, testing their reactions and pushing for a slip that reveals the culprit. Will Bob's clues lead to a breakthrough, or is the killer still outsmarting the great detective? Stay tuned, and if you're loving this mystery, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to catch the next twist. The evening settles over a little greenhouse like a heavy curtain, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and impending rain. Hercule Poirot stands in the drawing room, his silhouette sharp against the flickering firelight, his hands clasped behind his back. The room feels smaller tonight, the walls pressing in as the household gathers for what Poirot has called a little discussion. Captain Hastings sits near the door, his arms crossed, his brow furrowed with impatience. "We need all this drama, Poirot," he whispers, leaning close. "Just tell them you've found some clues and see who squirms." Poirot's green eyes glint with a mix of amusement and reproach. "Mon ami," he replies softly, "the art of detection is not in the shouting, but in the silence. We set the trap, and the guilty, they will betray themselves." Hastings huffs but settles back, resigned to Poirot's theatrical methods. At the detective's feet, Bob the fox terrier lies alert, his ears twitching, his gaze fixed on the assembled group as if he, too, is waiting for someone to slip. The household is tense, their faces a gallery of unease. Emily Arundell sits in her usual high-backed chair, her hands folded tightly, her eyes darting between her relatives and Poirot. Charles Arundell lounges on a sofa, his grin forced, a glass of brandy in his hand. Teresa, his sister, perches on the armrest, her cigarette sending curls of smoke into the air, her expression one of studied boredom. Dr. Tanios and his wife, blah, sit close together, his hand resting on hers, but the gesture feels more controlling than comforting. Miss Lawson, Emily's companion, fidgets with a lace handkerchief, her lips pursed as if holding back a flood of words. The servants, Wilhelmina and Annie, stand near the door, summoned at Poirot's request, their faces pale and guarded. His grandfather clock ticks loudly, each second amplifying the tension. Poirot clears his throat, and the room falls silent. All eyes on him, monsieur. Madame Poirot begins, his voice calm but commanding. "I have been invited to this house to uncover the truth behind certain incidents. Madame Arundel's. Accidents? They are not accidents. I think—" A murmur ripples through the room, shock from Emily, a scoff from Charles, nervous gasp from Bella. Poirot raises a hand, silencing them. The staircase polished to a dangerous sheen. The painting, its hook tampered with. The sherry, perhaps not so innocent as it seems. He pauses, letting his words sink in, watching their faces. Charles's grin falters. Teresa's cigarette trembles, and Annie's hands twist in her apron. And then Poirot continues. There is Bob the dog, who sees what we do not. His barks, his stares, they point to the truth. I have found clues, a receipt for polish, a sliver of glass, a metal shaving. Someone in this room knows more than they say. Ugh. The room erupts in protests. Charles laughs too loudly, saying, "This is absurd, Poirot. You're making a mountain out of a molehill." Teresa stubs out her cigarette, her eyes flashing. "You're accusing us based on a dog? Really? This is ridiculous?" Dr. Tanios adjusts his glasses, his voice measured but strained. "As a doctor, I assure you, there's no evidence of foul play. You're upsetting my wife." Bella nods, her eyes downcast, but her hands tremble. Miss Lawson's voice rises, shrill and defensive. "I've done nothing but care for Miss Emily. How dare you suggest otherwise?" Wilhelmina snorts, folding her arms while Annie looks ready to bolt. Emily, silent until now, speaks softly. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust you to find the truth. I feel it someone wishes me harm." Bob, as if on cue, lets out a low growl, his eyes fixed on the staircase beyond the door. Poirot's trap is subtle but deliberate. He's not accusing anyone outright. He's planting seeds of doubt, watching who squirms, who overreacts. He mentions the clues vaguely, gauging their responses. Charles's laughter is too forced, Teresa's anger too quick, Tanios's calm feels rehearsed, and Bella's silence screams fear. Miss Lawson's indignation seems genuine, but Poirot knows better than to trust first impressions. The servants are the most telling. Wilhelmina's defiance could hide guilt, and Annie's terror suggests she's seen something she shouldn't. Poirot decides to push further. "The receipt," he says, holding up the folded paper. "It is for floor polish. Purchased just before Madame Arundel's fall. Who among you visited the hardware shop in Market Basing?" The question hangs in the air, and the room grows. "Still," Annie gasps, then claps a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. Wilhelmina glares at her, a silent warning. Let's unpack this moment. Poirot's strategy is pure genius. He's not just collecting clues. He's using them like a scalpel, cutting through lies to expose raw nerves. By revealing just enough, he's forcing the guilty party to react, to make a mistake. It's like playing poker, showing just enough of your hand to make your opponent sweat. For us, it's a lesson in reading people, not just what they say, but how they say it. Ever been in a group where someone's reaction didn't match the moment? That's what Poirot's watching for. And Bob, once again, is the star. His growl at the staircase, his focus on the group, it's as if he's pointing Poirot to the culprit. But the detective needs more than a dog's instinct to make his case. Poirot shifts tactics. Turning to Emily, "Madame, tell me of Bob's behavior the night of your fall. Where was he?" Emily frowns, thinking. "He was in the hall, barking furiously. I thought he'd seen a rat, but he kept running to the stairs, dropping his ball there." Poirot nods, his mind flashing too. The oily stain on Bob's ball, he pulls it from his pocket, holding it up. "This ball," he says, "it carries the same oil as the staircase. Perhaps Bob was not chasing a rat, but a saboteur." The room grows quieter still, the tension palpable. Charles coughs, Teresa lights another cigarette, and Annie looks like she might faint. Poirot doesn't press further. He's planted the seed, and now he'll wait for it to grow. As the group disperses, Poirot lingers in the drawing room, his eyes on the staircase. He notices Bob trot to the bottom step again, sniffing, then looking up, as if expecting someone to descend. Poirot kneels, examining the step once more. The scratch mark is deeper than he thought, and nearby he finds another clue, a tiny thread of fabric, dark blue, caught in a splinter. "Most interesting," he murmurs, pocketing it. Hastings, watching, shakes his head. "You're building a case on threads and dog toys, Poirot. Well, I hope you know what you're doing." Poirot's smile is serene. "I always know, mon ami." The truth, it is close now. This chapter's about pressure, turning up the heat until someone cracks. Poirot is not just solving a mystery. He's playing a psychological game, and he's winning. The clues are piling up. Foil, glass, a receipt, a thread in Bob's behavior is tying them together. For us, it's a reminder that truth often comes from watching, waiting, and pushing just hard enough. Ever confronted someone and seen them squirm? Share your stories in the comments. I'm all ears. In the next chapter, Poirot will follow the trail of the receipt, digging into Market Basing's secrets and getting closer to the killer. Will Bob's clues finally reveal the truth, or is the culprit still one step ahead? Don't miss it, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay in the loop. The morning dawns gray and misty in Market Basing, kind of weather that makes the village feel like it's holding its secrets close. Hercule Poirot stands at the front door of Little Green House, adjusting his immaculate overcoat and hat, his breath visible in the chilly air. In his pocket, he carries the receipt for floor polish. A small but weighty clue that could unravel the mystery of Emily Arundel's accidents. Captain Hastings, bundled in a scarf and looking thoroughly miserable, joins him, his boots scuffing the gravel path. "I don't see why we have to traipse into town, Poirot," he grumbles, pulling his coat tighter. "Can't you just interrogate someone else and be done with it?" Poirot's mustache twitches with a faint smile. "Mon ami," he says, his voice crisp as the morning air. "The truth, it is not found by staying still. This receipt, it is a thread, and we must follow it to its source. Come, let us visit the heart of market basing. Bob, the fox terrier, bounds out the door, his tail wagging, as if eager to join the hunt. Poirot gives him a nod. You too shall assist Monsieur Bob. The walk to the village is brisk, the cobblestone streets slick with dew. Market basing is quiet, its shops just opening, their awnings dripping from the night's rain. The hardware shop, a small establishment with a faded sign reading Jenkins & Sons, sits between a bakery and a post office. Poirot pauses outside, studying the window display buckets, tools, and a stack of polished cans identical to the one in the tool shed. This, he says to Hastings, is where our saboteur began their work. Inside, the shop smells of sawdust. In metal, its shelves cluttered with nails, paint, and gardening supplies. An elderly man, presumably Mr. Jenkins, stands behind the counter, his apron stained with grease. He eyes Poirot's polished shoes and pristine suit with mild suspicion. Morning, gents, he says, wiping his hands. What can I do for you? Poirot, ever the charmer, offers a polite bow. Monsieur Jenkins, I am Hercule Poirot, a visitor to your charming village. I have a question about a purchase made some weeks ago. Produces the receipt, smoothing it on the counter. This 4-floor polish and a tool. Can you recall who made this purchase? Jenkins squints at the paper, his brow furrowing. We sell a lot of polish, sir. Hard to say. But let me check the ledger. He shuffles to a dusty book, flipping pages with gnarled fingers. Here it is, March 15th. A can of polish and a screwdriver. Paid in cash. I remember now. It was a young lass, nervous-like. Didn't say much, just grabbed her things and left. Poirot's eyes narrow. A young lady, you say? Can you describe her? Jenkins scratches his chin. Small Mousie wore a dark blue coat, kept looking over her shoulder like she was afraid someone was watching. Poirot exchanges a glance with Hastings, who's suddenly alert. A dark blue coat, could it match the thread Poirot found on the staircase? Most interesting, Poirot says, pocketing the receipt. And this young lady, she was alone? Jenkins nods. Far as I recall, didn't seem the type to be buying polish, though. More like she was running an errand for someone else. Poirot thanks him, his mind racing. Annie, the maid, is small and nervous, and Poirot recalls her wearing a dark coat when she served tea. But was she acting alone or under orders? As they leave the shop, Bob sniffs the ground, his nose twitching, then lets out a sharp bark, staring. At a narrow alley across the street, Poirot follows his gaze, but sees nothing, just shadows and a stray cat. What do you see, Mon Petit? He murmurs, patting Bob's head. Back at Little Greenhouse, Poirot decides to test his theory. He finds Annie in the kitchen, polishing silver with trembling hands. Mademoiselle Annie, he says gently, a word if you please. Her eyes widen, and she drops a spoon with a clatter. I haven't done anything, sir, she stammers, her face pale. Poirot's voice is soothing but firm. The hardware shop in the village, they recall a young lady in a blue coat purchasing polish. This polish perhaps found its way to the staircase where Madame Arundell fell. What do you know of this? Annie's breath catches, and she looks. Ready to cry? It wasn't my idea, sir. I was told to buy it, that's all. I didn't know what it was for. Poirot leans closer. Who told you, mademoiselle? But Annie clams up, shaking her head, tears spilling. I can't say they'll hurt me. Before Poirot can press further, Wilhelmina bursts in, her voice sharp. Leave the girl alone. She's got work to do. Annie flees, and Poirot notes the cook's protective glare. Let's unpack this. Poirot's following the trail like a bloodhound, but with finesse. The receipt has led him to Annie, but her fear suggests she's a pawn, not a mastermind. The blue thread, the polish, the screwdriver, they point to sabotage, but who's pulling the strings? Wilhelmina's interruption is suspicious why. So quick to defend Annie. And Bob's bark in the village, did he sense someone watching, someone connected to the plot? Poirot's building a case, but the motive remains murky. Emily's fortune is the obvious lure, but the household's dynamics, Charles's debts, Teresa's extravagance, Tanios's ambition, Bella's fear, Miss Lawson's loyalty suggest. A web of greed and desperation. For us, it's a lesson in persistence. Truth often hides behind fear, and it takes patience to coax it out. Ever had someone dodge a question so fast you knew they were hiding something? It's Annie right now. Poirot returns to the drawing room, where Emily sits with Bob at her feet. He shares just enough to keep her trust, mentioning the polish. But not Annie's confession, Madame, he says. Your dog, he is remarkable. His barks guide me. Tell me, where was he when the painting fell? Emily frowns, thinking, in my room, barking at the door. I thought he wanted out, but he wouldn't leave my side. Poirot nods, his gray cells worry. Bob's behavior is consistent, always pointing to danger, always near the scene. He decides to inspect the tool shed again, hoping for more clues. There he finds a screwdriver with a worn handle, matching the receipt's description. Its tip is scratched, as if used to pry something loose like a painting's hook. As night falls, Poirot sits by the fire, the clues swirling in his mind. The polish, the thread, the screwdriver, Annie's fear. He's close, he knows it, but the puzzle isn't complete. Bob curls up nearby, his ball at his paws, and Poirot notices something new, a faint scratch on the ball, like it was dragged. Across a rough surface. You, mon ami, he says to Bob, are a witness most extraordinary? Hastings, sipping a brandy, rolls his eyes. You're putting too much stock in that dog, Poirot. Next you'll be asking him to testify. But Poirot's smile is confident. Perhaps he already has, mon ami. This chapter is about chasing leads, no matter how small. Poirot's tenacity following a receipt to a shop, a thread to a coat shows how details build a case. For us, it's a reminder too. Follow through, even when the path seems unclear. Ever found a small clue that led to a big revelation? Share it in the comments, I'm curious. In the next chapter, Poirot will confront Annie again, hoping to break through her fear and uncover who's behind the plot. Will Bob's instincts lead to the killer, or is the truth still out of reach? Don't miss it. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay in the loop. The air in Little Greenhouse grows heavier as dusk settles, shadows lengthening across the polished floors and ornate wallpaper. Hercule Poirot sits in the small study, the flickering light of a single lamp casting his sharp features into relief. His hands are folded, his eyes half closed, but his mind is a whirlwind of activity. Piecing together the clues he's gathered, the oily polish on the staircase, the tampered painting hook, the bitter-smelling sherry, the receipt from Jenkins and Sons, the blue thread, and the scratched screwdriver. Most of all, he thinks of Annie, the nervous maid, whose tearful confession in the kitchen hinted at a larger conspiracy. She's terrified, that much is clear, but of whom? Poirot knows he must tread, carefully push too hard, and she clam. Uppy too softly, and the truth will slip away. Captain Hastings, slouched in a chair by the window, breaks the silence with a sigh. Poirot, this is getting us nowhere. Annie's scared, sure, but she's just a maid. Probably mixed up in something she doesn't understand. Can't we focus on the real suspects, Charles, Teresa, that shifty doctor? Poirot's mustache twitches, his voice calm but firm. Mon ami, the smallest pawn can topple a king. Annie knows something, and I will discover what. Patience, Hastings, is the key. Poirot decides to speak to Annie alone, away from the watchful eyes of the household. He finds her in the scullery, scrubbing pots with a ferocity that suggests she's trying to wash away her fears. The room is dim, smelling of soap and damp stone, and Bob the fox terrier is curled up in a corner, his eyes fixed on Annie as if he, too, is waiting for answers. Mademoiselle Annie Poirot begins, his tone gentle, almost paternal. You are frightened, yes, but you must trust Hercule Poirot. The truth, it will protect you. Annie's hands pause, her knuckles white around a scrub brush. Her eyes dart to the door, then back to Poirot. I can't, sir, she whispers, her voice barely audible. If I talk, they'll know. They'll hurt me or worse. Poirot leans closer, his voice a soothing murmur. Who, mademoiselle? Tell me, and I will ensure your safety. Annie hesitates, tears welling, then shakes her head. I can't. I swore I wouldn't. Please, sir, don't ask me again. Poirot doesn't press, but he notices something. Faint bruise on Annie's wrist, half hidden by her sleeve. It's fresh purple against her pale skin, and his gray cells snap to attention. It's Mark, he says, pointing delicately. He was not there yesterday. Who did this to you? Annie yanks her sleeve down, her face crumpling. It's nothing, sir. I bumped into a door. But her voice shakes, and Bob lets out a low growl, his ears flattening. Poirot nods, as if accepting her excuse, but his mind is racing. Gabreuse. A coerced errand to buy polish. A terrified maidsomeone is controlling Annie, using fear to keep her silent. He decides to shift tactics, focusing on the household's dynamics to uncover who holds that power. Dinner that evening is a strained affair. The long dining table, a battlefield of polite smiles and hidden agendas. Emily Arundell sits at the head, her frail hands gripping her fork, her eyes scanning her relatives with quiet suspicion. Charles Arundell, ever the charmer, tells a story about a horse race, but his laughter feels hollow, and Poirot notices him glance at Annie as she serves the soup. Teresa, in a sleek black dress, sips wine and makes biting remarks about the village's lack of nightlife. But her eyes keep drifting to Emily's untouched glass of sherry. Dr. Tanios talks about a medical conference, his voice overly cheerful, while Bella picks at her food, her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. Miss Lawson, hovering near Emily, fusses over her napkin, her chatter incessant but nervous. Wilhelmina, the cook, brings in a roast, her face set in a scowl, and Annie scurries behind, her hands trembling as she sets down plates. Bob, lying near Emily, watches the room with uncanny focus. His tail still, but his eyes alert. Poirot decides to stir the pot. Madame Arundell, he says, his voice carrying across the table. Your sherry? It is a fine vintage, yes? Perhaps it is not to your taste tonight. Emily frowns, her hand pausing over her glass. I've not been drinking it lately, she admits. It disagrees with me. A ripple of unease passes through the room. Charles coughs. Teresa's glass clinks against her plate, and Tanios adjusts his glasses. Poirot presses further, the staircase so beautifully polished. A credit to your staff, but perhaps too much polish, Nan. Wilhelmina's scowl deepens, and Annie nearly drops a serving spoon. Poirot's eyes miss nothing. Their reactions are clues, each one a piece of the puzzle. He mentions the receipt casually, watching Annie flinch and Wilhelmina's jaw tighten. Someone he knows is behind Annie's fear. And the bruise suggests it's more than just words keeping her quiet. Let's take a moment to unpack this. Poirot's playing a dangerous game, dropping hints to see who reacts. Annie's bruise and her refusal to name her tormentor point to coercion, but by whom? Wilhelmina's protectiveness could be loyalty or a cover. Charles's glances at Annie suggest he knows more than he's letting on. Teresa's unease around the sherry hints at guilt, and Tanios's nervous tics could hide a darker motive. Bella's silence is deafening, and Miss Lawson's fussing feels like a distraction. Bob, as always, is the wild card. His growls, his stares seem to point to the staircase, the heart of the mystery. For us, it's a lesson in reading fear. It's not just what people say, but what they don't. Ever known someone too scared to speak up? That's Annie's struggle, and Poirot's determined to free her from it. After dinner, Poirot lingers in the hall, examining the staircase again. Bob follows, dropping his rubber ball at the bottom step, the same spot where Poirot found the scratch mark and the blue thread. He picks up the ball, noting the oily stain and the faint scratch, and a theory begins to form. You saw something, did you not, Mon Petit? He says to Bob, who tilts his head as if in agreement. Poirot imagines the scene, someone polishing the stairs, perhaps at night, unaware that Bob was watching. The dog, chasing his ball, might have picked up the oil, even scratched the step in his excitement. But who was it? Poirot resolves to check Annie's coat for a missing thread and to test the sherry sample he collected. He also plans to speak to Miss Lawson, whose nervous chatter might hide more than loyalty. As the household retires, Poirot sits by the fire, his notebook open, his pen scratching as he lists the clues: the polish, the receipt, the thread, the bruise, the sherry, the screwdriver. Each one points to a deliberate plot, but the mastermind remains elusive. Hastings, sipping a nightcap, shakes his head. "You're chasing shadows, Poirot," and he's scared. "But she's not the killer." "Focus on the big fish, Charles, or that doctor." Poirot's smile is serene. "The big fish, mon ami, swim in deep waters. But the small fish, they lead us to them." Bob, curled up nearby, lets out a soft whine, his eyes on the staircase, and Poirot nods. "Yes, my friend, you know the way. This chapter is about fear, how it silences, how it betrays." Poirot's peeling back layers, using Annie's terror as a guide to the truth. For us, it's a reminder to listen to those quiet signals: fear, hesitation, a glance that lingers too long. You ever seen someone freeze up when you asked a simple question? Share your stories in the comments. I'm dying to hear them. The next chapter, Poirot will test his theory, confronting the household with new evidence and watching for the crack that reveals the killer. Will Annie break her silence, or will Bob's clues lead Poirot to the truth first? Don't miss it, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay in the loop. The morning light struggles through the thick clouds over Market Basing, casting little greenhouse in a muted, almost mournful glow. Hercule Poirot stands in the garden, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the damp grass, his eyes fixed on the ivy-covered walls of the mansion. The clues are mounting oily polish, a tampered painting hook, a bitter-smelling sherry decanter, a receipt, a blue thread, a scratched screwdriver, and Annie's bruise, but the puzzle remains incomplete. Poirot knows he's close, the truth, tantalizingly near, yet one piece eludes him: the identity of the mastermind behind Emily Arundell's accidents. Captain Hastings, bundled in a coat and looking thoroughly fed up with the countryside, joins him, his breath visible in the chilly air. "Poirot, this is getting ridiculous," he grumbles, kicking a pebble. "You've got a pile of clues, a scared maid, and a dog that won't stop barking. Why not just arrest someone and be done with it?" Poirot's mustache twitches, his voice calm but edged with determination. "Mon ami, to arrest without proof is to invite chaos. It is a delicate thing, and I, Hercule Poirot, will not rush it." Bob, the fox terrier, bounds over, his rubber ball in his mouth, and drops it at Poirot's feet, as if urging him to keep going. Poirot's plan today is to tighten the net, to use his clues to provoke a reaction that will reveal the culprit. He starts with Annie's coat, which he finds hanging in the servants' quarters. The dark blue fabric matches the thread from the staircase, and sure enough, there's a small tear near the hem. A perfect match. "Voila," Poirot murmurs, pocketing the thread for comparison. Next, he sends the sherry sample to a chemist in London, with a note requesting analysis for poison. But his focus returns to Annie's bruise and her terrified refusal to name her tormentor. He decides to confront the household again, this time with more directness, to see who cracks under pressure. He gathers them in the drawing room, where the fire crackles but does little to warm the tense atmosphere. Emily sits in her usual chair, her face pale but resolute, with Bob at her side, his ears alert. The others: Charles, Teresa, Dr. Tanios, Bella, Miss Lawson, Wilhelmina, in any form, a wary circle, their eyes flickering with unease. Monsieur Madame Poirot begins, his voice clear and commanding. "The incidents in this house are no mere accidents. The staircase was polished to cause a fall. The painting was loosened to cause harm. The sherry, I suspect, contains something unpleasant." A gasp escapes Bella, and Charles shifts uncomfortably, his usual grin absent. Poirot holds up the receipt. This, purchased at Jenkins & Sons, led to the polish that made the staircase deadly. And this, he produces the blue thread, was found where Madame Arundell fell. It matches a certain coat. Annie's face goes white, and she shrinks back, but Poirot's eyes are on the others. Someone here knows the truth. Someone coerced a young maid to buy polish, perhaps to do their bidding. Who was it? The room is silent, the ticking of the grandfather clock deafening. Wilhelmina glares, Teresa lights a cigarette with shaking hands. Dr. Tanios clears his throat, but no one speaks. Poirot turns to Annie, his tone gentle but firm. Mademoiselle, you are frightened? Yes, but silence protects no one.
Oh.
Me, who asked you to buy the polish? Annie's eyes fill with tears, and she shakes her head, her voice a whisper. I can't, sir. They'll know. Wilhelmina steps forward, her voice sharp. Leave her be. She's just a girl. But Poirot notices Charles's jaw tighten, and Teresa's cigarette tremble. He decides to push harder. The bruise. On your wrist? Mademoiselle, it was not from a door, was it? Someone threatened you? Annie sobs, and Bella lets out a small cry, her hands covering her mouth. Dr. Tanios stands, his face flushed. This is outrageous. You're harassing a servant with no evidence. But Poirot's eyes are on Bella, who's trembling, her gaze locked on her husband. Let's break this down. Poirot's tightening the screws, using the clues to corner. The guilty. The blue thread ties Annie to the staircase, but her fear points to someone higher up the chain. Wilhelmina's protectiveness could be loyalty or a cover. Charles's silence is unusual for a man so glib. And Teresa's nerves betray her cool façade. Dr. Tanios's outburst feels like a deflection. And Bella's reaction, fearful, almost guilty, suggests she knows more than she's saying. Lying near Emily, growls softly when Tanios speaks, his eyes fixed on the doctor. Poirot notes this, his gray cells connecting the dog's instincts to the human drama. For us, it's a lesson in pressure sometimes. The truth emerges when you push just hard enough. Ever seen someone crack when confronted? That's what Poirot's banking on. Poirot shifts focus to Miss Lawson, whose nervous chatter has been a constant background hum. Mademoiselle Lawson, he says, you are devoted to Madame Arundell. You see much in this house. Who polished the stairs that day? Miss Lawson's handkerchief twists in her hands, her voice high. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I was busy with Miss Emily's correspondence. But Annie, she's always cleaning, isn't she? Her deflection is clumsy, and Poirot senses she's hiding something. Perhaps not guilt, but knowledge. He decides to test her later alone. For now, he lets the group disperse, their unease palpable. As they leave, Bob trots to the staircase, dropping his ball again, and Poirot notices a new detail, a faint smudge on the banister, like a fingerprint in the polish. He collects it with a cloth, his mind racing. That evening, Poirot sits with Emily, sharing his findings carefully. Madame, your dog, he is remarkable. His barks, they point to the staircase, to the moment of danger. Emily nods, stroking Bob's head. He's always been my protector. That night, he wouldn't leave the hall, kept running up and down the stairs. Poirot's eyes light up. And did anyone else see this? Emily hesitates. Miss Lawson was there. Trying to calm him? She said he was being silly. Poirot files this away. Miss Lawson, always near, always watching. He resolves to check her room for clues, perhaps a letter or diary that reveals her role. As night falls, Poirot sits by the fire, his notebook filled with sketches of the clues and suspects. The net is tightening, but the killer is clever, hiding behind fear and misdirection. Hastings, sipping tea, shakes his head. You're close, Poirot. I'll give you that. But Annie's too scared to talk, and that dog can't testify. What's next? Poirot's smile is confident. Next, mon ami, we find the hand that holds the leash, the one who controls Annie, who threatens her. Bob, he will show us the way. Bob, curled up nearby, lets out a soft bark, as if in agreement. This chapter is about closing in, about using pressure to reveal cracks in the façade. Poirot's strategic, fronting, observing. Waiting is a masterclass in detection. For us, it's a reminder that truth often hides behind fear, but persistence can break through. Ever push someone to tell the truth and seen them falter? Share your stories in the comments. I'm all ears. In the next chapter, Poirot will search Miss Lawson's room and confront Annie one last time. The killer. Will Bob's instincts lead to the final clue, or is the truth still out of reach? Don't miss it. Smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay in the loop. The final day in Little Greenhouse dawns with a restless energy, the clouds parting to reveal a pale sun that casts long, wavering shadows across the ivy-clad walls. Hercule Poirot stands in the guest room, his suitcase neatly packed, his appearance as flawless as ever, patent leather shoes gleaming, suit pressed to perfection, mustache twirled with surgical precision. But beneath his polished exterior, his mind is a whirlwind, piecing together the intricate puzzle of Emily Arundel's near-fatal accidents. The clues are a constellation in his thoughts. The oily polish on the staircase, the tampered hook that sent a painting crashing, the bitter taint in the sherry decanter, the receipt from Jenkins and Sons, the blue thread from Annie's coat, the scratched screwdriver, and the bruise on the maid's wrist. Most crucially, there's Bob, the fox terrier, whose barks and stares have guided Poirot like a compass through the fog of deception. Captain Hastings, nursing a cup of tea and looking thoroughly done with the countryside, slouches in a chair. Nearby, Poirot, "You've got enough evidence to fill a museum," he grumbles, rubbing his eyes. "Can't you just point the finger and let us catch the next train to London? This place is giving me the willies." Poirot's green eyes glint with quiet resolve. "Mon ami," he says, his Belgian accent thick with purpose, "the truth is a delicate tapestry, woven from many threads. Today, I, Hercule Poirot, will reveal it, and the guilty shall have nowhere to hide." Bob, lying at his feet, lets out a soft bark, as if endorsing the plan. Poirot's strategy is to search Miss Lawson's room, suspecting her nervous chatter. Masks more than mere devotion to Emily. He waits until the household gathers for breakfast, their voices a low hum of tension drifting up from the dining room. With Bob trotting at his heels, his tail wagging like a metronome, Poirot slips upstairs to Miss Lawson's quarters. The room is sparse, almost monastica. Narrow bed, a worn Bible, a desk cluttered with notepaper. His gloved hands move swiftly, checking drawers and shelves with the precision of a surgeon. Beneath a stack of letters, he finds a locked wooden box, its key hidden in a sewing kit. Inside is a diary, its pages filled with Miss Lawson's meticulous handwriting. The entries paint a picture of loyalty tinged with resentment. "Charles mocks me behind my back, calling me a spinster leech. Teresa thinks she's above us all, spending money she doesn't have. I only want to protect Miss Emily." A chilling entry, dated the day before Emily's fall, reads, "I saw him in the hall at midnight, carrying a can of polish. He said it was for the floors, but his eyes were shifty. I fear for Miss Emily, but who would believe me?" Another entry mentions Bella. "She's always whispering with her husband, sneaking about. I don't trust them." Poirot's pulse quickens. He murmurs, "Charles or Tanios?" The diary is a goldmine, and he tucks it into his coat, knowing it's the key to cracking the case. Downstairs, Poirot gathers the household in the drawing room, the air thick with anticipation. The fire crackles, but its warmth does little to ease the chill of suspicion. Emily sits in her high-backed chair, her frail hands clutching a shawl, her eyes sharp despite her weariness. Bob lies at her feet, his ears alert, his gaze flicking between the door and the assembled group. Charles Arundell lounges on a sofa, his usual grin strained, a brandy glass dangling from his fingers. Teresa, in a sleek red dress, lights a cigarette, her movements jerky, her eyes darting to Emily's untouched sherry decanter. Dr. Tanios and Bella sit close, his hand gripping hers tightly, her face pale and drawn. Miss Lawson fidgets with a lace handkerchief, her lips pursed. While Wilhelmina and Annie stand near the door, the cook's scowl fierce and the maid's hands trembling. The grandfather clock ticks ominously, each second amplifying the tension. Poirot steps forward, his presence commanding the room like a conductor before an orchestra. "Monsieur, Madame," he begins, his voice clear and resonant, "this house has been a stage for a dangerous game. Madame Arundel's accidents. were no accidents, they were attempts on her life, orchestrated with cunning. A murmur ripples through the room, shocked from Emily, a scoff from Charles, a stifled gasp from Bella. Poirot raises a hand, silencing them. The staircase was polished to cause a fall. The painting's hook was loosened to crush. The sherry, I have confirmed, contains traces of arsenic. He holds up the receipt from Jenkins and Sons. This led me to the polish used on the stairs. A blue thread, from a certain coat, places someone at the scene. He pauses, his eyes sweeping the group. Annie shrinks back, her face ashen. In a diary, he continues, producing Miss Lawson's journal, reveals a witness to the plot. Miss Lawson gasps, her handkerchief falling to the floor. Someone coerced a young maid to buy the polish, threatening her into silence. Someone planned to inherit Madame Arundell's fortune. Who was it? The room explodes in protests. Charles slams his glass down, his voice loud. This is preposterous, Poirot. You're accusing us based on scraps and a dog's barking? Teresa's laugh is sharp, her cigarette trembling. You're out of your mind. Aunt Emily's fine, aren't you? Dr. Tanios stands, his face flushed. As a doctor, I protest this slander. There's no proof. Bella clings to his arm, her eyes wide with fear. Wilhelmina snorts, folding her arms, while Annie looks ready to faint. Emily's voice cuts through, soft but firm. Monsieur Poirot, I trust you. Find the truth. Poirot turns to Annie, his tone gentle but unyielding. Mademoiselle, the bruise on your wrist hit was no accident. Who threatened you? Annie sobs, her voice breaking. It was Dr. Tanios, sir. He told me to buy the polish, said it was for cleaning. When I hesitated, he grabbed me, said I'd regret it if I talked. The room freezes. Tanios shouts, lies, is delusional. But Bella's cry betrays him. It's true, she wails, collapsing into tears. He said we needed Aunt Emily's money for our children, for his practice. I didn't want to, but he made me help. Tanios lunges for the door, but Hastings, surprisingly swift, blocks his path. Poirot's voice is relentless. You, doctor, learned Emily's will favored Miss Lawson, not your wife. So you plotted, using Annie as your tool, poisoning the sherry, loosening the painting, polishing the stairs. But Bob, the faithful witness, saw you. He gestures to the terrier, who growls at Tanios, his hackles raised, ball-stained. With your polish, his barks at the staircase, they pointed to you. And Miss Lawson's diary confirms she saw you that night. Miss Lawson, weeping, nods. I was afraid to speak, but I saw him with the polish. The truth is laid bare. Tanios, cornered, slumps, his defiance crumbling. I only wanted a better life, he mutters. Bella sobs, promising to testify, her fear replaced by guilt. Emily, tears in her eyes, strokes Bob's head. You saved me, Monsieur Poirot, and you, my dear Bob. The police are summoned. And Tanios is led away, the household shaken but relieved. Poirot, serene, adjusts his hat. The little gray cells, they never fail, he says to Hastings, who grins, finally impressed. And that dog, Poirot, he's practically a detective. Bob barks, dropping his ball at Poirot's feet, as if claiming his share of the victory. Let's unpack this triumph. Poirot's genius lies in his patience, his ability to weave disparate clues. Thread diary barks into an undeniable truth. He read fear, guilt, and lies in every glance, every word, using Bob's instincts as his guide. For us, it's a lesson in trusting the small things, details, hunches, even a pet's behavior, to uncover big truths. Ever solved a mystery by piecing together tiny clues? Drop your stories in the comments. I'm dying to hear them. This case is closed, but Poirot's brilliance shines on. If you loved this thrilling ride, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell for more mysteries. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, keep your eyes open for the truth.